Good afternoon, and welcome to this edition of HeadTalk with myself, Ruth Benny, live on Facebook. We've had a bit of a break, but now that the schools are going back at the end of the month, we thought it was a very timely time to resume our HeadTalk sessions. So before I introduce today's head, our first female head, in fact, please like our page, like our Facebook, so you can click to get notified whenever we go live, and we'll be bringing you this series on a more regular basis from now on. So thanks for joining me today. I'm delighted to welcome, as I said, our first female head on HeadTalk from Chinese Academy Primary School. Please welcome Jane Lancaster-Adlam. Hi, Jane.
Hi, it's lovely to be with you.
Thank you for joining us all the way from Causeway Bay. Now, for those of our Facebook fans who don't know too much about Chinese Academy Primary School, I would like to do a little bit of an intro about the school with some fast facts. So if you have any questions about Chinese Academy Primary School, please comment or ask in the box underneath the video, and we'll try to answer them live. And if we can't get to them live, we'll get to them later on. So please tell us where, what, when, how, who.
So Chinese Academy is a small, well, relatively small primary school, which is located in Causeway Bay on Caroline Hill Road. Been in operation for 3 years now, and it's on the site of the beautiful Confucius Hall. So we have wonderful grounds around us and the hall itself. We're a single form entry, and we go from years 1 to 6. And the curriculum is really, it's a, perhaps could use the term hybrid curriculum, and it's a mixture of Western and traditional Chinese with Confucius values interlinked through a values education program.
Okay, that's a great introduction. Thank you, Jane. It really is a beautiful campus. And so for those of us that normally make the annual trek to the Rugby Sevens, we would pass your school on the way up to the Hong Kong Stadium there. And you're doing some more development works, is that right?
We have, yes. We've spent some time, in fact, during the COVID period, to upgrade school facilities. And we've actually built a dedicated STEM room, music room, and art room, and some additional classrooms during that time.
Yeah, I think it's important that people understand it's a real school building on a beautiful site in the middle of Causeway Bay, so super convenient. So when was the school established?
The school was actually established 3 years ago, and by ICAF, which is the International Chinese Academy Education Foundation, and Confucius Hall. And I've actually been here running the school since last June.
Right. So without getting too technical about, like, you know, the setup of the school, it's been through a few changes, and you've been here since June.
I have, yes, just over a year now.
All right, which leads us nicely into perhaps you could just give us a little bit about, you know, introduce yourself and your career to date.
Yeah, I've come from the UK, as you can tell. I live near Cambridge. I've been in education for the last 24 years and been ahead for the last 16 years, including a former GDST school and IAPS schools. And I've got a master's in education from Cambridge University in curriculum design.
Okay, so this is your posting in Hong Kong. Is it your first posting overseas?
It is indeed.
I recall that.
Yeah, but I've got a long association with Hong Kong, been coming for many years.
Right. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about, you know, obviously there must be some key differences in working in a small school in Hong Kong as opposed to some of the previous schools that you've worked at. What are your observations?
I think, especially in this position that I'm in at the moment, it's working with the cultural diversity and looking at how we can actually blend the Western and the traditional Chinese together, especially with the values education of Confucianism. And I think the expectations of parents and learning perhaps have been slightly different to the more, to the UK.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I've been in Hong Kong for 25 years, and still notice differences. How much did you know about Confucianism before you came to Hong Kong to take up this role?
In all honesty, not a great deal. But obviously, when I knew I was taking on the role, I've actually spent time learning more about it, obviously. And I certainly would love to learn more and endeavouring to do so, and also to learn more Chinese, because I have got limited Chinese at present.
I had good intentions all those years ago. My kids went to a preschool, actually, which where they learned a lot of Confucian values. And for those people who are watching who might not be super familiar with what is Confucianism, what is a very simple definition?
Well, essentially, we look at building in. There are 5 virtues. And these virtues actually do closely link to what we call moral values anywhere in the Western world. So the first one is Jen, and forgive me if my pronunciation is not quite right, but essentially that's love, benevolence, compassion for others. And then there's Yi, which is righteousness. Li, which is manners, and again, respect for other people. Ye, which is wisdom and the ability to know right from wrong. And then Sing, which is honesty and integrity. So as you can see, if you look at those, they're all the things that you would like to think that you would develop, as a person.
Right, so quite universal values that we would like our children to instill in our children. So let's segue then into how do you then incorporate those values into the classroom on a day-to-day basis?
So we actually run a values education program itself that is specific. And that's run by the Chinese team. And they actually link that into their teaching. So for each year group, they look at a different text. And these values are all interwoven through that. We then take those and we look at them within the other subject area with all of the hot staff team. And we have a weekly assembly at which children are awarded awards for recognition of doing things that actually link to those virtues.
So, okay, do you name your classes by one of each of the virtues?
We don't name our classes, but we do have a house system. So we run a house system. We've got 4 houses, and all children are placed into those houses. And each of the houses has a name linked to one of the virtues. And then we have house competitions over the course of the school year.
So what type of curriculum are you running? It's only a primary school currently, right? So you said years 1 to 6. Just clarify for us, please, Jane, the year 1 is 5 years old or is it 6 years old?
6 years old. So, yeah.
6. So your children joining you would have done K3
Correct.
in their kindergarten before they join you. Yeah, just want to clarify that.
That's right.
And then they would go up to year 6, which is actually year 7 in a British system school.
Yeah.
Is that right?
That's
okay.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
So primary school, the curriculum, could you tell us a bit more about what makes it different as well? I mean, what makes it different from some other primary schools would be more interesting, I think.
I think the reason it's different is that it is a fusion of Western and traditional Chinese. So we actually teach Mandarin, and Mandarin are the characters, traditional characters. Our actual teaching is 60% in English and 40% in Chinese.
Okay. Well, can you speak up a little? I think we're losing you. So 60% in Mandarin and 40% in English.
No, the other way around.
Okay.
And in every class, we have a English-speaking and a Chinese-speaking member of staff. So the curriculum itself is built up of a mixture of things. The English is the English national curriculum. As mentioned, the Chinese curriculum is traditional Chinese. We then have a STEM program, which is all about learning through inquiry and very small, more similar to an IB program. And then we have what we call integrated studies, which is a mixture of history and geography, but that's taught by jointly taught in English and in Chinese, and very much linked to the locality initially in the earlier years. We also have our sports program, and we do a broad range of sports, including swimming, sailing, football, we're working at the moment with the Hong Kong skipping team throughout COVID, and the children have been skipping at home. And we also have a music. Okay. Yeah, skipping. We also have a music program where we teach both traditional Chinese instruments and Western instruments. And we have an arts program as well with a dedicated, and they're specialist teachers for art and music and sport.
Right. So a well-rounded, rich program. I'm going to zoom in on a couple of areas that I know that parents always are interested. And of course, the number one key area of concern for most of our parents is proficiency in both English and Chinese. So can you tell us a little bit more? You said that there's 60% English and 40% Mandarin Chinese, and there's 2 teachers in the class at all times. And how does that work for some of the different subjects? Just a little bit more detail on that, please.
So, for example, as mentioned, with integrated studies, the subject is literally split and taught in 2 areas, partly in 50% Chinese, 50% in English. And members of the Chinese teaching team work alongside class teachers to deliver that, working together. We also, in our Chinese itself, we actually have 2 streams, because we have some children who are native speakers, and we have some children whom Chinese is a second language. So although it's very much language of immersion, we recognise that there is a need for quite high levels of differentiation. And so we'll have 2 Chinese teachers working with each class for Chinese lessons to ensure that they are meeting the needs of all of the children.
Do you have 2 streams for English or just the 1?
We actually don't have 2 streams for English at the moment, but what we do is for those people who might find, or those children who might have found the acquisition of phonics difficult, we actually run a program called Sound Training, which is a British phonics training program, but it enhances, it's had very good results with children who have English as a second language.
Okay, so you have 2 streams. Chinese is traditional characters, is that right?
Correct, yeah.
You don't too simplified for the non-native stream. They're still learning traditional characters.
Yeah.
I'm always interested by this differentiation in languages. Does it mean that they actually arrive at the same destination, that they take a different route to get there, or are they actually aiming for different endpoints?
I think it's all about aptitude, and it's very difficult because obviously we all learn in different ways. And if we take the English language and we look at some of the other countries and the way in which they don't expect children to read or to understand the phonemes, the phonics until they're actually 6 or 7 years old.
Yeah.
So for some children, they may come to Chinese as a second language and they may be in one stream. That's not to say that they're not going to reach the same standards as long as they've got full immersion and are, for example, living somewhere like here, where they're actually going to be surrounded by it. But there's no hard and fast answer to your question.
I know. I was just hoping that there might be, since the last time I asked somebody else. But it is interesting. I mean, from a personal point of view, and I'm very involved with helping families. Well, obviously, but one of my particular areas of interest is Chinese learning for non-Chinese families. What would be the experience in your school, for example, for a child who's entering at age 6 at the very beginning, without Chinese language as a heritage language or without having that language at home? Would they be able to be immersed to the point where they could acquire Chinese to a very high level?
I believe that they could be if it's done in the right way. So what we recognise is that, depending on where children come from and the experiences that they've had preschool, because especially during COVID at the moment, they are very different for all. It's about ensuring that they actually can understand what is being taught and what's being said. So whilst there are some views that if you're in a Chinese class or a French class, whatever, that is the only language spoken. But actually, you've got to ensure that there is an understanding of the child and of the people, of what's being taught. So that's about the way in which you deliver the curriculum. So it's about using visual cues, it can't just be spoken word. And it also is about ensuring that if they don't understand, that actually there is a translation there for them, so that they're not just there.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because in fact, would you agree that starting at 6 with either Chinese or English it's actually rather late?
I think it is. No, I completely agree with that. I think the younger children can actually be exposed to different languages, the better.
Yeah. Are you able to tell us anything about the kindergartens? Do you have affiliation, connection with any kindergartens, or where did the children come from?
Currently, the children that have been joining us have come from a broad range of kindergartens locally in Hong Kong. We've also had children join us from large schools where they've actually entered into a large school with a preschool class, and they've actually struggled in a group of 30. And so they've benefited coming into our classes, which only have 15. And then we also just developed an association with Sunshine House Kindergarten groups in Causeway Bay and Causeway Bay.
Okay, good. So we can announce that. That's exclusive here today, to say that Sunshine House is affiliated with Chinese Academy Primary School.
It's an association with them, so we're helping to manage the staff teams there.
Right, and presumably those children would be well prepared to then enter your primary school and have some sort of priority?
Not necessarily priority, but they would absolutely have followed a curriculum that is very similar.
Okay, all right, good. I wasn't sure if we were allowed to say or not. Let's talk a little bit more about the differentiation and the fact that how that works, because you have very small classes. They're 15 at the moment, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
When you build up the school, what's your maximum class size?
We're actually going to, currently on the current site, we'd actually be keeping the pupil class size at 15. So it will be a small group.
Okay, so that's probably the smallest in town, I would say, one of the smallest. So there's a debate, some people say that actually maybe at what point is a class too small? What is the optimal class size? I know there's probably no exact answer. You've probably worked in schools with, what was the size of the class in the UK schools that you worked in?
They were 24.
Well, not too big. Okay. So we have a huge range. We have children of 6, 7 and 8 years old in classes of 15 at the very smallest, up to 30. What's the difference? What's a different experience in a class that varies so much in size?
I think it all comes down to, it's all about social and emotional development and actually the needs of a child. There are some children who benefit greatly from being in a bigger group, and they cope very well in that group. But there are other young people who actually find it challenging to be in a large group and benefit, especially in the earlier years, being in a smaller group where actually they can find their own voice. And I think one of the main things that we're very good at is developing children's own sense of inner worth and a love for learning, because actually they feel valued, they feel confident enough to speak out. We all know that for some people, some young people and adults equally, if you're in a large group, only one person or one or two people will speak because they dominate the situation. So I think, there's a value of a smaller group for some initially.
And that would tie into some of the values-based, the character education that you have in the program. One of the questions I like to ask principals sometimes is, what sort of a student do you think would really thrive in your school?
I think they come from all sorts of backgrounds, but young people who, perhaps as we've just mentioned, maybe slightly shyer or have struggled in a large environment, but children who really want to experience a broad curriculum, who are going to really learn from the broad experiences that we've got and develop themselves. So I think I'd like to say we could take any young person. I would equally say that for some young people, being in a smaller environment, as you mentioned, might not be the perfect place for them. And as they grow and develop, they benefit going from a bigger environment.
I mean, I would imagine that you would like children who are going to take advantage of all the opportunities. If you have to put a sports team together, you've got a decidedly smaller pool than most. So you would need children to step up, for example. We actually...
I was going to say, but I think when you've got a smaller group, you're often more likely to achieve that. So we have got a football team, and they've played in a few football matches when they were on. And equally, we had a small group of children this summer who went and trained with the Hong Kong sailing team, and then went on to do their level 1 sailing. So it's about thinking, in a broader way, because there are many sports that are both individual sports and team sports.
I forgot to mention, for those of you who are watching, thank you for joining us today. We're here with Jane Lancaster-Adlam, head of Chinese Academy Primary School. We're more than halfway. Please stay with us until the end, because we have a really great video that really shows your children in action on the beautiful campus, and we'll play that as we go out today. And if you have any questions, please type them below and we'll get to them just before we finish. I want to ask you, Jane, I know that there's a very a core part of the program which is very close to your heart, which you've developed since you arrived, which is the Nurture program. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, we run a Nurture program. We've got 3 staff on the staff team who are trained in special needs, social and emotional developmental needs. And so for some young people, as we mentioned actually earlier about, for example, the literacy program, that's run in the Nurture program. So if we recognise that whatever reason a child's struggling in any way, it could be academically, it could be emotionally, we actually recognise those people, highlight the need for them to have some extra support, and they actually go to the Nurture room and we run different groups. We also have 2 staff trained in Lego therapy, which is a therapy that helps children with emotional difficulties. And if you can regulate those difficulties at a young age, then obviously it's much easier and much better for them.
So we're talking about inclusivity here, and it's a can of worms completely, and especially in Hong Kong, you've probably realised it's viewed very differently here in Hong Kong to the way that it's viewed in the UK. So we do have parents that have children with children who've been diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, on the spectrum, what have you. Can you tell us a little bit about the sorts of conversations that you're having with those parents in terms of understanding their needs as they're considering your school?
Yes, so what happens is if a parent came with a child with a diagnosis, what we actually do is we get the child to come and spend some time with us. So the most important thing is to see whether actually they can cope in the environment. It's about whether they can cope, but also whether we can meet their needs and help and support them. So for me, the most important element of working with all children, whether they've got special needs or not, is about complete open honesty and working together as a team, a whole team. So the parents and the broader community. So maybe somebody has a speech and language therapist or an occupational therapist. And it's about everybody working together for the sake of the child. And it's really important that you just take children that you know you can meet their needs. And very often, the thing that's missed and misunderstood is that many of these children have a very high cognitive ability.
So you would consider all of the reports, and so we would ask the parents to be completely open and honest, which we always do, and come with their reports. What kind of testing would you do, if any?
I'm trained in educational testing, so actually I do some baseline testing with the children when they join, but also from the perspective of actually watching them in an environment. So I actually take that responsibility on myself, and we then come to a decision. And sometimes we'll have children actually join a group for a week to see how it goes first before actually giving them a permanent place at school.
Okay, and you don't advocate the use of shadows in your school?
I do advocate the use of a shadow if the child is used to having one. However, I would rather that, if possible, they can as quickly as possible learn not to be with a shadow consistently, because otherwise actually they're not developing the skill set they need to be able to cope for themselves.
Yeah, good point. There's two areas I want to cover. I want to go a little bit more into the curriculum. You mentioned STEM, and STEM is something that we didn't hear until a couple of years ago, really, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Not so much. And I think when you introduced it, you said it was similar to an IB program, or did I hear that correctly?
More, learning through inquiry element.
Inquiry.
So STEM obviously is the integration of science and technology, and the way in which we are doing it is that we run our integrated studies program, but alongside that we've carved out the science and technology and mathematics, so that the children are actually split into 2 groups, so that we have a small STEM group looking at projects linked to the integrated studies, and that group actually go to the STEM room and work and think collaboratively using technology to do different projects. So the whole planning's been done as a whole, an integrated program, so that it all works alongside each other. And it's actually the head of maths that's running the STEM program, but we also, within that, we've built as well vegetable gardens in the grounds of the school.
I saw those, yes.
So we're actually building in as well the cookery program into this, and the design technology side, in that the children design the flower beds, build the flower beds, etc.
I really feel that, I mean, the space is amazing, the location is fantastic, and the fact that you are, you're quite unencumbered in terms of lots of levels of bureaucracy. You can introduce things or take things away quite easily and quite quickly, right, as according to the needs of the children. I can see there's a lot of changes in the last year. I've been visiting the school since it first opened, and I think it looks quite different now to how it did in the very beginning. So I'd encourage anyone who did come to the school a couple of years ago to come again and have a look, because there's been a lot of big changes. Are you able to welcome parents in to visit the school? Are you doing some tours, or would those be virtual?
We are. No, what we're doing is we're doing individual tours. So at the moment, actually, I'm taking any parents that would like to just look around individually, showing them the school. So that's the way that we've elected to do it on an individual basis.
And it will be yourself?
It will, yeah.
Okay. So we'll put the details in the box below, and if people want to book an appointment, then they can get in touch with you. We're almost reaching the end. I mean, what would you like to say to people who are watching as a final parting words about your school?
I think it's really important to come and visit and see what it's like. It's a little gem dotted in Causeway Bay. We've got amazing facilities from a space perspective, and it's a very nurturing, caring environment where all young people will hopefully reach their full potential, whatever it is.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us today, Jane. And if we get more questions, we will definitely get to answer them. Thank you for joining us, Facebook. We've been with Jane Lancaster-Adlam today from Chinese Academy Primary School. And please do check it out if you have children of primary school age. And that's all for our Head Talk this afternoon, and we will be back on a more regular basis. If there is a head that you would like us to invite on, then please let us know, and we'll do our very best to invite them onto this Facebook Live. So thanks again. Have a wonderful rest of the week. And one more final question, Jane. How happy are you that the kids are coming back at the end of the month?
Absolutely ecstatic. And
ecstatic.
I'm sure the parents are.
We are. And on that note, thank you, Jane, for for joining us, and thank you to all of those who have watched today. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Chinese Academy is a private primary school based in Causeway Bay. It offers a child-centered primary school education in a nurturing and supportive learning environment. Children are encouraged to become independent learners, both inside and outside of the classroom. Its international curriculum is infused with Chinese culture and values, delivered through bilingual immersion. It promotes each student's intrinsic motivation for learning and to develop their individual potential. The school provides a platform for quality education. It encourages students to pursue excellence. It develops a love for learning inside and outside the school environment, and it produces global citizens with a solid understanding of both Chinese culture and international perspectives. This is Chinese Academy.